Hello my friends, I'm Rich Larson and I'm the IRC Tire Guy. Today we are breaking down an extremely important skill, especially for this time of year. It's late spring, early summer. The higher elevations are now starting to see less and less snow, which means you will be encountering a lot of deadfall. Those gnarly trees that always fall in awkward angles on the trail. Now, I know there are different levels of riders that follow this channel, and I appreciate every single one of you guys for supporting the effort we are putting in. A lot of you single track riders are going through and clearing out those down logs, and I appreciate that work so all levels can enjoy the trail. But I've got to say, this is honestly my favorite time of year. I'm not a huge single track guy. I personally only want to ride the hardest situations all the time. To each their own, right? But this is the time of year when the single track is impassable because of those down trees. And coincidentally, the only time I'm riding any single track. In regards to the style of riding I prefer, many have asked the question, why don't you just go around it? Or why don't you just cut the down tree out? Well, it may be a little cliche, but it's always rang true for me. Robert Frost said, "Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by." And that has made all the difference. Instead of seeing an impassable trail, see a challenge that you can choose to accept. And I have a few tips that will assist you when taking the path less traveled. So let's get into it. The first tip I can give is, of course, focus on being comfortable with your double blip. Of course, we've done multiple breakdowns on the double blip technique, which we will link in the description, and you can check it out right here. You may have heard me mention this before, but if you can hit one obstacle 15 different ways, you can probably hit any obstacle one way when it matters. Well, these down trees are considered a situation that matters, and the focus on how many different ways you can hit a single obstacle will make all the difference. Now, of course, beyond being comfortable with your double blip, let's talk momentum. Each time you find yourself in one of these situations, momentum is always key. A lot of times, you won't be able to clean those awkward logs perfectly with only your tires making contact and nothing more. The next goal is to have the pace to teeter your way over the obstacle. I'm always thinking in terms of how high and how much suspension rebound I need to carry my front end and front tire to allow the front of my frame past the obstacle. Of course, most of the weight of the machine needs to be over the top of the log. So in those really impossible situations, I aim more towards the back of my frame as well as my pegs and linkage to be the area that teeters over the top. Again, when speaking of momentum, especially in log situations, all of the throttle needs to be before the obstacle. The goal is to have enough pace to make it over the log without giving the machine any additional throttle while the rear tire is making contact with the log. The fact is, even in the driest situations, logs have much less grip than regular dirt. Listen to the difference in throttle delivery between a failed attempt and a successful attempt of the same log. In the failed attempt, you can hear a delivery of power while in the obstacle. I didn't carry enough momentum before the obstacle to assist in propelling my machine above the obstacle. Of course, as I apply throttle, my rear tire spins and I wreck. On the successful attempt, it's all throttle before, almost none through. I'm allowing the spinning inertia of the flywheel and engine to pull me through the obstacle with traction. This log was uphill, crooked, and elevated. During the failed attempt, I didn't have proper momentum. Because of this, I was slightly out of balance to the left. Simply put, the faster you go, the easier it is to maintain your balance. Because of the lack of momentum, I didn't have the propulsion over the log. My front tire dropped quickly before my rear tire was over the apex of the log. Being this is an uphill, this exacerbates the lack of momentum. After the front tire drops, the hill is literally pushing back on my front tire. I try to apply throttle, but because this is a freshly down aspen tree, the bark is incredibly slick. My rear tire spins and I go down. On the successful run, I have an increased momentum, better balance, more load on the flywheel, more inertia, and the ability to hold traction all the way through. Because of all these factors, during the successful attempt, I have an increased ability to hit the obstacle exactly how I need to, which brings me to a very important point. In every awkward log situation, the importance of hitting the obstacle square is imperative. Now, what do I mean by square? Whether we're riding awkward shaped logs, cliffs, riverbeds, or side hills, an understanding needs to be made that your motorcycle best performs in a straight line. A simple rule is the center of your tire gives the most consistent traction. So every obstacle I hit, my focus is on hitting it as straight on as possible. Just like leaning the bike out and weighting the outside peg when riding a side hill. This is where we find the most consistent traction from our tires and the highest ability to find that momentum that is so important. We adjust our body and machine to match the obstacles and situations we are riding. When approaching a downed log on a side hill or a crooked log in a trail, there's no exception to that rule. Notice the adjustment in my body and bike when hitting a crooked log. I'm literally turning, almost pivoting into the log on the approach to hit it as straight as possible. Also, notice the adjustment when on the side hill. I'm leaning out towards the downhill, always weighting my outside peg heavily, then almost dropping down to the log. On the approach, I run the bike up the side hill to the high side of the log I'm attempting. That way, as I traverse over the log, I drop onto the side hill trail I'm riding. Because the log matches the angle of the side hill, when your tires collide with the log, the machine will automatically lose elevation on the hill. This is almost a counterintuitive feeling. When a downed log is covering the side trail you may be riding, the feeling is to stay low, but going high gives you the highest chance of landing back on the trail. A simple way to remember this is it's always easy to lose elevation, but it's hard to make it back up. Speaking of elevation, what about those dreaded downhill logs? In every downhill log situation, patience is key. Gravity is assisting you in gaining momentum with ease. So in these downhill situations, your ability to remain at a slow, controlled pace is extremely important. The less throttle you use in these situations, the better gravity can assist you. But it can also really hurt you. Trust me, downhill crashes are the worst. A great tip is to have that static balance on lock. The better you are at static balance, the easier it will be to remain at a very slow pace in those downhill situations. If you aren't taking your feet off the pegs, you have an increased ability to control the brakes and pace of your machine. Now, whenever I have a really gnarly downhill log, I use the stuff and smash technique. The full breakdown on that skill is available right here. We'll also link it in the description. Again, because this is a downhill, gravity is assisting you, so less throttle is better. Ideally, I use both front and rear brakes on the approach, and as my front tire drives into the log, I stop the machine completely. I prefer to have my front tire planted just behind the apex of the log. I begin to move my weight back in preparation for the release of the clutch and the driving forward of my body and hips. Usually, the movement of my body forward, especially on downhills, is slightly before the release of the clutch. The reason for this is you want an increased ability to move that weight back as the rear tire drives into the log. Your front tire has a long way to drop, and you need to counteract that with your hips and weight. Again, patience and gentle throttle is required. Start small and work your way up. The path less traveled is never an easy one. If you guys are enjoying this channel, please like, comment, subscribe, and share this video, as well as follow us on Instagram at IRC Moto and my personal Instagram page at RichLarson511. And until next time, keep shredding.